So we're doing Vihi Ha'anon. So the Hemshech to the previous Maimah is that beforehand, how do we make the Olam a Keli to Gilu Eir and Sof? Through his Hapcha Chashech L'Nahira, through being Mahapech the Tzimtzum. Whatever that means, we know that the Rebbe has a discussion about that. But if you are Mahapech the Tzimtzum, then you can have Gilu Eir and Sof down here. Okay, so in order to know what it means to be Mahapech the Tzimtzum, we have to know what did the Tzimtzum do that requires to be Nishapech. So he says in this Maimah that the Tzimtzum did two klolistik inyonim. It affected the Eir and Sof HaBlikvul, and it affected the Eir HaGvul. In the Eir and Sof HaBlikvul, there's one effect. What happened? The Tzimtzum was that the Eir and Sof went away, Siluk Legamri. So that's fairly straightforward, what the Tzimtzum was. When they get to the Eir HaGvul, so he says in this Maimah and the next, there's three things happen to the Eir HaGvul. Just doing chronology what happened first. What are the three things when they get to the Eir HaGvul? Number one, the Eir HaGvul became Nivdal Bifnei Atzmoi. Number two, it became Behischalchus. And number three he's going to discuss in the next Maimah. So let's just think about the first thing. The first thing is there was the siluk of the Eir HaBlikvul. That's the first klap, that the Eir and Sof HaBlikvul went away. And he's Meirich what that means. What was beforehand and what comes after the siluk. And the Nekudas HaRichas here's the marker of the famous expression that what's the difference between Lifnei HaTzimtzum and Achar HaTzimtzum? It depends if Elakus is Bipshitas or Oilamis is Bipshitas. Before the Tzimtzum, Elakus is Bipshitas and Oilamis is Behischadshus. And the Achar Tzimtzum, it's the opposite way around. Oilamis is Bipshitas and Elakus is Behischadshus. What does that mean that before the Tzimtzum, Elakus is Bipshitas? So let's think of it like this. It says in Eitz Chaim, it's all quoted all over the place, that Koydem HaTzimtzum hoy Eir and Sof mala kol HaMetzias. V'loi hoya mokim la'amidas oilamis. What is the translation of loi hoya mokim la'amidas oilamis? He said it doesn't just mean that there was no space. I'm not talking physically there was space. Loi hoya mokim means there was also no nesinas mokim. There was no possibility for such a thing. Because kol zman there's Eir and Sof is begilui, that means Elakus is bipshitas, there's no room for anything else. So if we wanted to imagine that, theoretically, imagine somebody is born inside the sun. I know it's impossible, but imagine somebody was born inside the sun. And you ask him what time's the Shkia. Does that question make sense to him? Why not? Because he lives inside the sun. There's no such thing as night. Don't know what that means. The concept doesn't exist. Huh?
It's always chatzos.
It's always chatzos, yeah. Chatzos hayom, you mean? Yeah. It's always, that's it. That's all he knows. Oh, just like we say, the opposite extreme. If somebody lo knows a sagi no, he doesn't know what light means. He doesn't know what colors mean. These things don't mean anything to him. Is in the other extreme. Somebody's born inside the sun. He doesn't know what night means. What does it mean, nighttime? In order to have such a musag of day and night, you have to be outside of the sun. So Koydem HaTzimtzum is like Kolel Batzmusay. It's inside the sun. There's no such concept of Metzias Oilamis. So Elakus is Bipshitas. Now Sheikh La'achar HaTzimtzum, everything changes itself around. Oilamis is Bipshitas. That means, what do we take on the pashtus we see in Metzias? And if there's Gilul Elakus, it's a big chiddush. How did this happen? If we would say nowadays there's a Novi or there's somebody having Seidas HaTorah like the Rashbi, so it's a big pella. How did it happen? Because a Metzias is Bipshitas. So that's Bechlolis, what he's being Meirich over here is that wherever there's a Lakus Bipshitas, that is Al Derech Lifnei HaTzimtzum. These are all dugmois to show what would it look like down here if it would be a Lakus Bipshitas. So it would have to be like in the times of, he says, like for example, by Kriyas Yamsuf, and how it's going to be La'asid Lava, there's going to be a Lakus Bipshitas down here in this oilam. That's the chiddush of La'asid Lava. There's going to be an oilam, and nevertheless there's going to be the hergish of a Lakus Bipshitas in the Metzias oilam. So we're going to have people, regular people, which are created after the Tzimtzum, and yet at the same time they're going to have the hergish of a Lakus Bipshitas, which means that Nevuah is not going to be a Chidush, it's going to be natural. It's going to be a natural thing that everybody tells Nevuah, because of Lakus. He even says that there's no such thing as Niflois. There's an interesting thing which I only noticed this recently. He says, page Ayin Aleph, he says, well, the whole Inyan of Niflois, of the Rashbi, was a Pella. No Niflois, there's no Seidus. Everything's going to be naturally like that. So what happened when the Tzimtzum, what happened after the Tzimtzum? That all changed. The Inyan of the Kus B'Pshitas changed, and all of a sudden there's an Inyan of Metzias. And this is where he starts going into the more detailed thing of what exactly happened to the Oyer HaGvul by the Tzimtzum. What happened to the Oyer HaGvul by the Tzimtzum? The Oyer HaBligvul went away, and what happened to the Oyer HaGvul? Now you have to remember, just to repeat, that the Iyar over here in this Hemshech is, and the one of the main emphasis in this Hemshech is that we're going according to the Shitta that there is an Oyer HaGvul Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Right? We spoke a little bit about it last time. That in the Oyer itself, they already all been saying there should be an Oyer HaGvul. So that means basically it comes up, there's like two Oyers there. There's the Oyer HaBligvul and there's also the Oyer HaGvul. And all you have to do is take away the Oyer HaBligvul, and automatically you'll have the Oyer HaGvul, which is Taka why, as he brings right at the end of the Maimah, the famous question of the Eitz Chaim, why did you have to have a Siluk? Why don't you just take away the Bligvul and leave over the Oyer HaGvul if it's there? If it's an Oyer Echad Pasha, the way it sounds like from Eitz Chaim, the Lashon sounds like one Oyer. So if it's one Oyer, how can you split one Oyer into pieces? It's not. It's like taking. Can you take a chelik of the amkus of your svara achas? Can you split a piece of that amkus and give it to somebody? You can't do that. It's one inyan, one oyer, one svara, and either you have it or you don't have it. But if you say it's not an oyer echad pashut, the way it sounds from the Rosh Hashanah, you say it's an oyer bligvul, but inside that, since the Eibishter wanted there should be an oyer gvul, therefore shir ba'atzme b'koyach, the hashara, the Oyer hashara, which is the Oyer HaGvul. So there is an Oyer HaGvul there. If that's the case, Eitz Chaim says, so why don't you just take away the Bligvul and leave over this Oyer, which is the Oyer HaGvul, if it's already there on its own? That was the question of Eitz Chaim, and he brings it at the end of the Maimah. And Achtaka, that's one of the things he wants to be masber. The answer, what is the answer to Eitz Chaim? We'll get to that in a second. So what does it mean that the Oyer became separate, bifnei atzmai? The Oyer HaGvul, the first problem with the Bligvul went away, okay? And what's with the Oyer HaGvul? He became nivdal from the Oyer HaBligvul. What does that mean? What happened when it became nivdal? What was beforehand? If we're saying that it's possible to leave it on its own, that was the question of the Eitz Chaim, why not take away the Bligvul and leave over the Oyer HaGvul? Then what was the metzius of the Oyer HaGvul when it wasn't on its own? When it was together with the Bligvul? What type of metzius does he have over there? We're going to have to say that when we say that lifnei atzimtzum elakus b'pshitas, that includes also the Oyer HaGvul. Even mitzad Oyer HaGvul, elakus was b'pshitas, and there was no nesinas mokim really to metzius of Olamus. So what was the metzius of the Oyer HaGvul? How did it look when it was lifnei atzimtzum before it got separated from the Oyer HaGvul? So the lashon of the Maimah is on page Aleph Ayin Reish Beis, where he says the Inyan HaBeis. This is where he starts talking about what happened to the Oyer HaGvul. He says, let's look at the third line. He says, "Validei hatzimtzum nivdal bechinas ha'or shelafi erech ha'olamus shu bechinas ha'or levad." So it became separate. V'gam shebazeh yored ha'or mima'alosei ha'atzmi. V'kayadua de bechinas chitzeines ha'or k'shehaya mu'urev v'kolol bebechinas pnimis ha'or hoya b'madrege el yoyna yoysa. So let's examine this in the Kudah. Ubezeshin is Galav and Nivlu Fnasa Yored Mimalose. What was it beforehand, and what happens when it becomes separate? So, in order to understand what it means, what was it beforehand? This is we're talking about an Inyan Kloli, not just here. It is negate to many places. the musig of hiskalolus. He says, kolol u'ma'urav v'kolol bebechinis pnimis. What does it mean, hiskalolus? When we talk about hiskalolus, that something that's lower is kolol in something that's higher. So we could think of it in a very, a very practical, gashmistic way. This beforehand was kolol inside that. Okay, so it wasn't noticed yet. As if inside the shemesh it wasn't noticed yet. When it comes out, it's noticed. But when it was inside, it was just lost because of the bigness of the sun, or in this case the bligvul didn't allow the chitzonis or the oir hagvul to be nira v'nigla. It was kolol inside, but that's not exactly what kolol means. Kolol has a bit more depth to it than that. When you say something lower is kolol in its mocker, is galus, it doesn't just mean it's found there. It means that the dova hanichlal is oila b'madregas hakoilol. You must have heard of the expression kol hakol b'ha'etzim harehu k'moi ha'etzim. When something is kolol and something's higher, it's not just that it's there and it's lost because it's inside something greater. When something is kolol in the mocker, it's nis'ala to the madrega of the mocker. That's what it means. Kol hakol b'ha'etzim hareyu k'moi ha'etzim. It's like the madrega of the etzim. You have this in Avodah. You have this also clearly in Tanya. When the Alter Rebbe talks about his kalolus of a neshama of a yid, which he does a mitzvah. Is there a Tanya here? Or that's too much to ask for. There is a Tanya there behind the thing. But let's talk about it. Mr. You all remember Tanya, Perek Mem Vov, right? What does it say in Perek Mem Vov? What does it mean? Asher kedishanu. Asher kedishanu. Remember the Lashon? Epis? Asher kedishanu means shehalonu l'kodesh ha'elyon. Oh, thank you very much. Let's see the exact Lashon. He says Asher kedishanu. Shehalonu l'maylas kodesh ha'elyon. Baruch Hu. Shehi kedushas shel HaKadosh b'chveido v'atzmai. Ki al yidei yichud ha'nefesh v'hiskalalusa ba'oir insof Baruch Hu harehi b'mailus madregas kedushas insof Baruch Hu. What does it mean, niskalolus? When it's niskalol, he becomes b'mailus madregas kedushas insof. He becomes the level of the koilel. The nichlal becomes part of the koilel. In other words, when oir is nichlal imoy, it doesn't mean it's just there, as if like you have a space over there and it's also it's just lost inside there somewhere. When the oil is nichlal in the moor, it doesn't have a din of oil anymore. It's a din of moor. It's part of the moor. It's not a metzias bifnei. It's not something that's kolol inside. It becomes b'mailus amadregas the koilel. Right? Now it's also geshmak if you can find a dugma in Gashmius, a dugma in halacha. So for the Bali Nigla over here, just a short dugma of what would it mean that something is kolol, it has the din of the koilel. What? He's nichlal inside the odom. But you're almost there. Don't go what? That's a good example. Uba yerech imay has a din of imay. He's an uba. When you're going to do kaparas, you're going to take an extra chicken for the uba. Doesn't matter. Now it has a din of yerech imay.
You've zegt Hemel has a...
Okay, yeah, that's an example. There's another one from Hilchos Shabbos, which is interesting. If you have herring on Shabbos, right? Now, why do we have gefilte fish on Shabbos? What's one of the reasons we have gefilte fish? Gefilte fish? The vleosen's going to be a gefilte fish, you know that?
Take the bones.
Because the bones, right? You shouldn't go picking bones. But according to the Tzemach Tzedek paskins, that if you have a herring with these small bones, you are allowed to take them out in order to eat the fish. As long as you're eating it straight away, you're not preparing a whole meal. You're allowed to take the bones out and eat the fish.
The bones out?
The bones out. Which is l'cha'ira p'saydus v'teich eichel. How are you allowed to take it out? So he says because it's muvla there, and it was never p'saydus. It's only p'saydus when you take it out. If you put it back in, it'll be a problem. But when it was there, it was not p'saydus. It was muvla inside the herring.
All fish bones.
Huh?
All fish bones the same thing?
I don't know if all fish. He talks about herrings there, so I don't know if all fish have the same thing, but maybe because it's small, I don't know. You actually have the same thing. L'cha'oro, you could explain. There's a Mishnah in challah which talks about the flour. When you make flour for a challah, right? And the flour has the nice flour, and it has what you call mursum, which is big shtiklach, like how do you translate mursum? It's gas. It says it's chelik hagas of the flour. So he says if you're mixing it all together as is, you're not separating it, then you have to take challah. So you have how many? 5 pounds of challah. You take a piece, give it to the kohen. What happens if you took the mursum out? So the mursum is like the psoilus, is the hagas of the flour. Can you put it back in and make that part of the thing? He says, no, you can't put it in. If it goes back in, it's not part of the amount of flour. Once it's gone out, it can't go back in. What's the reason? It just says because ein derech lahachzir. The way the shtega is that you don't stick the mursum back inside the flour once it's come out. What would that mean? Because once it came out, it lost its iskalolus. It's no longer a chelik of the flour, but beforehand, because if people eat flour like that, then it should never be allowed to be part of the flour of the shir challah. If people eat mursum together with the rest of the flour, elamai, once you've taken it out, it becomes separate. It's already lost its skalulus, so it can never go back in and become part of the thing. And kohena, there's other dugmois of such things. You're learning your idea. Everybody's learning your idea, Mr. Damano. So in Sim Pedala you have a din of teloim. Or perhaps that's not part of the Smith department. Okay. But there's a din of teloim. What happens if you have a worm on a lettuce or vegetables? Yeah, are you allowed to eat it? Teloim, shrotzim, cholila. But it depends when. If it grows within the thing and it never went out, shrotzim al ha'oretz. If it never went out onto earth, it's part of the peri. It's part of the yerek. So you don't have to do anything. You can eat it. Just we don't know which one went out and maybe it came back in. But if you know that this is how the vegetable grew with
the apple doesn't have any wormholes.
What's that?
The apple doesn't have any wormholes.
Yeah.
And you find a worm inside the apple, you know the apple came.
That it grew with it, right? Yeah. That would be part of the apple. So again, you see, once it came out, it became outside of these scholars. So going back to Inyon and the Nimshul, when the Oir HaGvul comes out of the Bli Gvul, it becomes a separate sin. It becomes a din bifnei atzmai. But when the Oir HaGvul was colon inside the Bli Gvul, it wasn't like there was two things over there. It's mineu be, it's kol hakol be'etzem areu k'mo ha'etzem. It has a din of Bli Gvul. So how are you going to make it from Bli Gvul into Gvul? You're going to have to do some drastic measures to take it out of that iskalolus and give it a whole new din of Oir HaGvul. So how does that happen? So he says that's through the siluk. That's what he refers to at the end of the Maimah. You asked me earlier. That's the hakol. You have to go in the opposite direction to the gilui of Ein Sof. Ein Sof is gilui, and by doing a tzimtzum, you're going backwards against the whole flow of things of gilui, and that is called a hakol. That's going backwards.
Those who don't hold up this part, that there's an idea of gvul before it, so they saying even behiskalus there's not gvul according to the.
So again, there is behiskalus. There is behiskalus, but what is it when it's behiskalus? It's a chelik of Bli Gvul. It's a prat in Bli Gvul. It's not a separate inyan.
We're saying that it's
after the tzimtzum, it becomes a separate inyan.
No, but I'm saying the other shita that holds that there's not that it dar is pashat and there's
then there's no shaila that it was part of Bli Gvul. The chatchila was Bli Gvul. Avada, you need to have a siluk and you have to start. You have to. What's that?
The Bli Gvul is gevar and gvul.
They see that the kalim are.
They hold that the kav even after the tzimtzum is Bli Gvul. They just hold it's going through the rishima. It's being concentrated as if gvul, but they hold be'etzim that the kav is Bli Gvul. I think we went through this last time. The shitta that holds the oiris apshutim holds that the kav is be'etzim Bli Gvul.
Even behiskalos, there's no inina.
It's chitzonis of Bli Gvul, but it's not an oir hagvul. Okay, so that's what it means. The first thing that the Shas, that Simpson, there was a siluk of Bli Gvul, and there was a Yerida in the oir hagvul. This Yerida is not Stama Yerida. He's come out from his kalolus and become an Inyan Bifnei Atzma. This is a big deal. Then, the second thing that happens through this fact that the Oyer HaGvul becomes Nivdal from the Oyer HaBli the second major thing is he talks about that it becomes the Bechinas Gvul and it becomes the Bechinas Ischalkus. If you've learnt the Maimah of, what do you call it, the Hayesheves Bagad Tavshin Gimel, which is the Mugadika Maimah, whatever brings this Maimah down over there, especially in the Ha'oras, it's based on a chelik of this Maimah, and he brings down, but there he only seems to be discussing about the Inyan of Ischalkus. And also in this Maimah, it seems to be the main thing he's discussing Ischalkus. But if you look on page Aleph Ayin Reish Hey, you'll see that he equates Gvul and Ischalkus together. Look how he does it inside the Lashon. He says, the line begins, after Ach be'emes les pirche me'ikara. Look on the fourth line, he says, why is there no Shaila me'ikara? Because what's the problem to have Gvul and Ischalkus from Bli Gvul? Why not? He says, V'hu ma'shakos of Avedis HaKodesh, the ha'in sofu shleimus b'li chisaron, v'alkein yesh b'i keich HaGvul, shim teimish keich ha'bilti b'agvalim, keich ha'gvul, atem chas shleimus, with famous Avedis HaKodesh. Then he says, after that, v'chein hu be'inyan ha'ribui, and brings them around Mipra. You can see here his mashve, Gvul, and Ischalkus. Both things he's be'ikka mayrach when he gets to Ischalkus and Ribui, but you can see he's using it's as if the Maral and the Avedis HaKodesh are saying the same thing. The Mitzad Ein Sof you can have Gvul, Mitzad Ein Sof you can have Ischalkus, there's no difference. So that would mean to say that even, therefore on the next page, when he talks about the Shitta that holds the Oyer Pnimi is an Oyer HaGvul, he also needs the Tzimtzum B'derech Siluk. Let's learn the last keta of the middle paragraph of Aresh Ayin Vov. He says, the line begins Ischalkus. He says, V'gam lefi mashin isbar b'drush zeh. You see how he emphasizes drush zeh. In other words, in Ayin Beis, he wants this, he's mainly going out for this shitta. Sha'o'er pnimi gam k'moishu kedem ad tzimtzum hu b'bechinas midig gvul. That there is an Oyer HaGvul lifnei HaTzimtzum, umikol malkim ein zeh bechinas koyach HaGvul shebein sof. It's not the koyach HaGvul, in other words, the koyach that makes kelim. Shari zehu meha'oyer sof ha-bli gvul. This is part of the bli gvul, hu bechinas min ha-knaf. Rak shezehu ma she'oyer sof ha-bli gvul shir ba'atzmei li is oyer bechinas midig gvul, v'hashar azois hi bechinas koyach HaGvul shebein sof. It's only b'koyach, in other words, it's not b'poyel. As he says, Commissioner Spariel. In other words, even the shitta that holds the be'etz and the oyer is an oyer ha'gvul, and it was there before the tzimtzum, it doesn't mean it was gvul already. Why not? Again, because once it's mu'urav lifnei ha'tzimtzum, it has a din of bli gvul. It's a chelik of bli gvul. In other words, Gvul has two ways of being Gvul. Gvul can be Gvul because it's from here to here, that's it. It's a Davar Mugbul. And Gvul can be a prat of Bli Gvul. Why is there Gvul lifnei HaTzimtzum? Why is there an Oyer HaGvul even b'koyach? It's only mitzad shleimus ha-bli Gvul. He's b'shleimus, ein sof shleimus dekula. So he's koyel bli Gvul, he's obviously bli Gvul, and obviously he has Gvul as well, because shleimus ein sof has also Gvul. But the Gvul mitzad bli Gvul is a prat in bli Gvul. It's not Gvul l'shem mitzvah's Gvul. You understand what I'm saying? There's Gvul l'shem mitzvah's Gvul, and there's Gvul l'shem mitzvah's bli Gvul. Why do you have Gvul only as a shleimus? In other words, like this. Let's take a marshal of a Rav and a Talmud. If you have a Rav and a Talmud, the Talmud is a small child that knows nothing. So how much does he know? He knows Aleph Beis. That's all he knows. Is he Mugbal? He's Mugbal. The Rav also knows Aleph Beis. And he himself had to be mitzamtzum himself in order to explain the Aleph Beis to the child. Would you say that he becomes Mugbal? Or would you say it's a shleimus yosa, that he's not just a genius in his own level, he's able to relate even to a child? You'd say, faket, so Mairis Shleima Melech, he's able to be Mamshul Mishalim and to go down. So the shleimus of his chachma is that he's not just Gvul, he's also able to go down to Gvul. So his Gvul is not Gvul l'shem Gvul, he doesn't become Mugbal. His Gvul is a prat in his genius, in his bli Gvul. The same thing over here, the Oyer HaGvul lifnei HaTzimtzum is not Gvul, it's a prat in bli Gvul. In order for it to come out from being a prat in bli Gvul, which is the inyan of Iskalolus Lamailus Kodesh Elyon, that is a chelik of the Oren Sof HaBli. In order to become an inyan of Oyer Gvul, the Shem Gvul, you're going to have to make a total separation. You're going to have to schlep him out from the chelik of Bli Gvul, not just to become to be Masalik the Bli Gvul, not just to become a Gvul as a chelik of Bli Gvul. You're going to have to separate between the two, and that's what the Tzimtzum is, to separate and extract Gvul from being a chelik of Bli Gvul. And that's what he says at the end of the Maimon. It's going back to the last page, Reish Ayin Ches. This is going back to the question of Eitz Chaim. Hine Eitz Chaim Hiksha Mibrimna Hoya Tzimtzum V'Chinas Siluk Ha'ol Lagamri. This question is what is asked in he brought this down right at the beginning of the Hemshech. So he says, why was the Siluk Lagamri? The Eitz Chaim asked the question. V'lo nisha hakav mitchila. V'tiritz she'im hoya nisha hakav lo hoya efshelis havas oilemis min ha'oil. V'acha shelis havu yechelim lekabel ha'oil. So first he's bringing down what the Eitz Chaim says. The Eitz Chaim asked the question, if there's an Oir HaGvul, why don't you just take away the Bli Gvul and leave over an Oir HaGvul? That's what the Eitz Chaim asked the question. What does the Eitz Chaim ask the answer to that? What does the Eitz Chaim answer to that? Why was there a Siluk Lagamri? Why do you have to take everything away? Leave over a chelik of the Oir, which is an Oir HaGvul. That's the Chashan of the Eitz Chaim. What does the Eitz Chaim answer to that? He says, because if you would leave over even a little bit of oil, you'd never be able to have the mitzias of Kalim and oilibus. This is something, Bemerson, that's needs a discussion for itself. What's the pshat Eitz Chaim? That's what he says. The reason why you have to be masalik everything is in order to be in the skala of the koyach hagvul, the sheirish hakli. The Rebbe Nishma over here is going to be mechadish. It's not just for the keli; it's for the oil itself. In order for there to be an oil that can go down into oilamus, you also need the siluk. V'yeshloim, that's what he's saying now. V'yeshloim, the kamekenhu ba'oil gufa. The im hayanisha oil hakav. Hainu, which oil? What is the oil hakav? Masha shia oil sof lahoy b'chinas midah gvul. If you would have left over that oil, which was previously kolol, loy hoy ha'oil b'chinas midah or b'chinas ischalkos. What does that mean? It would have been like it was lifnei hatzimtzum. It would have been with the same power as Elokus B'Pshitas. It would have been as it was beforehand. What was it beforehand? A prat of Bli Gvul, not an inyan b'fnei atzma of Gul, l'shem mitzvahs Gul. It would have been an extension of Bli Gvul. That's why he also has to be nisalim. V'kasher nisalim ha'oil legamri, including this oir hagvul, v'nimshach achakach der dilug hatzimtzum, and now comes back ha'riubo alidei hatzimtzum b'midah v'mishkol, etc. U'b'chinas ischalkus. So there's a necessity for the siluk is not just for the mitzias of oilemus, but it's also in order that it should be the oir hagvul should be an oir hagvul. So there's a big chiddush b'negeh to the oir hagvul that even if you're going to hold that there was an oir hagvul lifnei hatzimtzum. Why was there an oir hagvul? Because shir ba'atzma b'koyach chol masher os b'lis b'poel. So you have the hashara, you have the oir hagvul lifnei hatzimtzum. Nevertheless, the way it stands lifnei hatzimtzum, it's a prat of Bli Gvul. And if you take it out as is, it's still a prat of Bli Gvul. It's hetzachon hedahais chalkos. It's hetzachon pshitas. And we don't want that. We want the sinus machma for mitzias. Whereas if he goes away and then comes back, that's called a dilug. The going away and coming back is called a dilug because you've been mafsik the oil and then you've jumped over this hefsik and come back as an oil hagvul. That's what dilug is. Just you asked earlier, what is the moshel of the hakor of two chachomim which are seisim? Says the Emerson is that this moshel is not really explained anywhere.
Not in the Mimer earlier either.
They're bringing down from all the places where it says the same thing. It doesn't really explain it to. Maybe in Samachay there's a few more oases.
Yeah, we had it last Mimer in Samachay.
Samachay had a few more oases, right? Just a few more oases, but we spoke about it then?
No, we didn't get there.
See, the problem is, he wants to say, how do over there, this is not mamish the subject, he's just using it as a dugma, so it's a zaitika thing. He's saying over there in that Maimon, the earlier in Samach Vov, he says, how do Kalim come out from Oiris? This is a separate, almost It's a separate subject. When the Oyer Kav comes down and it goes into Oyremes, it's also, the Kav is also Maitzor, not just Oyres, it's also Maitzor Kelim. And how did Kelim come out from the Oyer Kav?
His Avos
His Abbas Oyer Nasa Akli.
picked it up on the way through the Tzimtzum of Pesach.
Oh, so because went through the Rishimu, so it was Makabel in it also the Oyer HaGvul, the Koyach HaGvul. So it has the Inyan of Kelim. But how do you extract Kelim from the Oyer HaKav? So he says you need to have this Hakov Oyer Makif and Oyer Pnimi. So what's the mashal? He says like two Chacham which are arguing, and one is Seisha, the other one's Svara, and therefore he's Mamtzi a Svara Ketana. That was the question. What's the mashal? What's the problem with the mashal?
How does that explain what we're saying also?
He's just using an example like friction. Friction is when two things rub together, you have sparks flying. So here there's friction. There's one Chacham saying his svara, the other guy asks him a question.
It's Mamtzi.
He says,
whatever. That's not the Ikr.
That's not. It's nice exactly. So the vort is that how did it come about? Through the hakor, through the opposite directions. He's saying this, and he goes and asks a question, and then he has to affirm for himself. So he comes up with this svara. So that's called hakor. He's going in the opposite direction. That's the musig of haskar. So he's saying the same thing in the nimshal over here. We're using that as a dogma for over here. Here we're saying that the kav should come down, should stay over. Why do you have to go away? He has to go away and come back because that friction, that opposite direction, means he's being zuklapt. You're going backwards. He is in the way of coming down. You tell him go away. It's like when you tell somebody to go away and he comes back the second time, he comes b'hachno. He comes and sometimes you come back even stronger than before. But the vort is that after there's a hakor, he comes back. It's already because there was a tnuah hafkis. He went away. It's the whole opposite of the Indian of Gilui. So when he comes back ki'ilu, a separate thing. The
Svara Ketana is the second Svara to answer the question?
Yes, it's a small Svara to answer the question. See, the problem with the mashal is what people usually get mixed up. Usually when you have somebody asking a question, it usually says the opposite. What does it usually say? If Talmud is machkibus Rabbi, what's the usual? You're saying your svara, and the Talmud comes along and asks a question. That's mo'era by the Rav, a tifera svara. And what does he say over here?
Here it sounds like more of a. Sometimes it's more of a technical thing. Somebody comes up with an annoying question, and you're brushing them off with a side svara.
Exactly. So
you didn't come up with a whole new guy in your face.
So why not? Why is this?
Come up with a cheap band-aid Sparta, you know.
Yeah, but the question is why don't we say
like this
why don't we say that the question is going to be mo'er b'hema even a tifra verstand? So I would say the diuk is there's a moshel of shnei bali sichrim. So the diuk when Chassidus brings down a moshel, that moshel that the shaila is mo'er tifra havana is by Rav and a Talmud mashpia mekabel. The mekabel has a mila that he's mo'era by the Rav a taste thing because he's being mashpia and the Talmud is being mekabel, and as a mekabel he's able to be mo'era the mashpia. Always the mila of the mekabel is the mila misheira shamashpia. Here he says shnei bali sichlim, they're like chavrusas, they're equal. So there's no, he's not being mashpia to him, he's saying his svara and the other guy's attacking him. So he has to come up with something. Imagine you're saying a pilpul in a kinnis Torah, and when somebody on the other side asks you a question. You don't want him to spoil your pilpul. So you come up with anything just to get rid of the question. Just to get rid of the question. That's not mashpia makabel. Mashpia makabel is when you're teaching and the guy comes with a good question. What's the question? It makes you think deeper than it was before. The etzem hashpo is already a maila semakabel. Alas kamakam is tamad amachkim as Rabbi asks a question. So that's why he doesn't say mashpia makabel. It's a diuk. Shnei bali sichlim, two equals. And that mashal is Rav and Talmud. That this is only a dugma, ba'alma, this is only a dugma, as I take a dugma, that when there is two opposite directions, he's asking a question on him. In other words, two opposite directions, that's called hakor. Same thing over here, since the Oyer HaKav did not come b'nichusa, he had to be nistalik, which is, we have to remember, what does it mean, siluk again, translate the word siluk? That the whole elokus b'pshitus that we had living inside the sun has been ois, that's stopped, finished. And now come back, it's a whole Olam Chodesh Ra. is outside of the sun. Beforehand, if there wouldn't have been the siluk, the sun is still there. So he's just an extension of the sun. He's very close to the sun, and he's an extension of the sun. He still feels the way it was when he was inside the sun. But if you totally take away the sun, and then suddenly you have miles away, you have a ziv, which you don't even see the sun. Through a cloud somewhere, you see a ziv. This is a totally different type of ziv. It's not nirgish, it's a chelik of the sun. It's nirgish ki'ilu, it's an inyan bifnei atzmai. And that's what dilug means. Dilug means you're jumping. You see, is Mary from the motion of dilug?
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a long
you're
period.
jumping, and you don't see the connection
Walking,
between here and there.
running, and jumping.
Yeah, he jumps up. He was standing here. If he's walking, you see a connection. When he jumps, you don't see. There was a hefsek. How did he get from here to there? He arrived. Vayavai. He came in. That's called dilug. So how did the kav arrive? Vayavai. Where's he coming from? I don't know. So there's a tzimtzum over there. I don't see where he's coming from. If he would have come before, I would have seen as a hemshech of Ein and Sof. So, I think is in a nutshell the whole mimer. All right.